Are you thinking about making a podcast? If you are, I know you want to be able to make that podcast in a way that's easy and not complicated. And you want to be able to make that podcast in a way that it's not going to cost you an arm or a leg. Well, I have a solution for you. It's called Anchor. It's the easiest way to make a podcast. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast. Here's what you need to do. Download the free Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's anchor.fm to get started. Start your podcast today. Good morning, everyone. It is Saturday, July the 18th, 2020. It is currently 12:55 a.m. Central Time. Yes, you heard that right. It is 12:55 a.m. 12:55 in the morning. I'm not saying the wrong time. I'm not stating it the wrong way. No, 12:55 a.m. And I know it's almost 1 o'clock in the morning. And here I stand in the middle of my study. I don't have my podcast set up like I typically would, so the sound quality is not great. I'm recording this using my iPad, but I think I have something interesting to say. I think I have something interesting to tell you about. Remember, this is the Currently On podcast, and I'm here to tell you about what's on. So what's on at 1 a.m. on this Saturday? Well, if you're looking for something to watch this weekend, you've come to the right place because I have a suggestion for you. And we always know that when I suggest something, you know it's a good suggestion. You know it is. So listen to me carefully and hopefully you'll check this out. And hopefully I can provide maybe a different perspective about this that maybe you haven't considered. Now, if you've already watched it, maybe I can add something to it that will go, maybe I need to go back and watch that again. I didn't really think about it, all right? So hopefully this will turn out to be worth your time. That's what I always try to do, is to tell you what's on, talk about it, analyze it, and offer a different and unique perspective to it. So let's get to it because, well, at some point I do need to go to sleep, all right? So let me tell you about it. There is a brand new show currently streaming on Netflix. The name of the show is Cursed. Cursed, C-U-R-S-E-D. Cursed. Cursed is an American fantasy drama web television series based on the illustrated novel of the same name. The show premiered on Netflix on July the 17th, 2020. So that is yesterday. So I'm a little late. I apologize. I wanted to record something yesterday about the show, but I got interrupted in watching episode 1. And so I wanted to wait till I finished it. I finished it just a little while ago. And I thought, okay, I know it's, almost 1 o'clock in the morning, but that's okay. I'm going to talk about it because all the thoughts are right there in my mind right now. I can react to it in pretty close to real time with watching it. And I think that just makes it more organic and more real. And hopefully you will appreciate that, okay? Most of you are asleep right now. So whenever you do hear this, hopefully, it's not like, well, that show was something new on Friday, but here we are on Saturday. That was, that show was so yesterday. I know people move on. A new show comes on Netflix. People sit down, watch the whole thing, and then they move on. So hopefully there's some people out there that this is still new to, and I'm giving you some information about it. But maybe for all of those who've watched it, maybe I can offer some interesting thoughts about it. Okay, not the whole series, obviously, because I've only watched one episode. So here it is. Cursed is an American fantasy drama web television series based on the illustrated novel of the same name. The series premiered on Netflix on July the 17th, 2020. Now, how can we describe what Cursed is about? Kind of give you the basic idea of the show. One article describes it as a reimagining of the legend of King Arthur. And I think that's really not an accurate way to describe it. It's basically taking the concept of King Arthur, right? That whole kind of legend and that kind of world a little bit, but it really kind of predates King Arthur. Think of it this way. King Arthur was kind of selected by fate, by destiny, to be the king, to lead, and to save. Well, before there was a king, destiny, fate, some mystical powers chose a queen to lead and to save. So think of it that way. It's here's King Arthur. Now let's back up before King Arthur, and here's this female hero, this queen. It's going to be a female hero in the story. All right, so that kind of gives you a better idea. Some refer to it as reimagining the Arthur legend, but I don't really believe that's an accurate way of describing it. This story is told through the eyes of Nimue, a young female with a mysterious gift who is destined to become the powerful and tragic Lady of the Lake. Now, if you know the Arthur legend, then you know a little bit about the Lady of the Lake, okay? Now, I'm not going to try to give anything away because whenever I do these recordings, I don't try to give any spoilers. So you're usually safe with me, all right? So that's the basic setup. Here's this story. So think about it again. Here's a young female, all right? And I think I can really drive this point home because I'm finding this interesting because I've been talking to you about Warrior Nun, which is currently streaming on Netflix. If you've missed any of those episodes, you should go listen to them because I find an interesting correlation. Now, I'm not going to try to bring these two together. I'm going to focus here on the show Cursed because that's what we're talking about. But there is an interesting parallel. And if you've listened to those episodes, you know. If you haven't, then I'm not going to bore you with trying to draw the correlation. Let me try to just set up the story this way. In Cursed, we have a female. She's the hero of the story, all right? She's the protagonist. She's the central character. She's the hero. She's the one that's going to, lead and rescue. But really, what you have set up in episode 1 is this kind of dilemma that's very similar to the same dilemma that was set up in Warrior Nun that's currently streaming on Netflix. And here is this idea. Here's a young female, and she's forced to choose between living a life for herself. She can seek pleasure. She can seek her own purpose. She can seek her own desires. She can seek her own gratification. She can seek her own goals, her own hopes, her own dreams, or she can surrender a life for herself to serve this greater purpose, this greater power, this mystical idea that seems to have picked her for something greater. And she doesn't really want this mystical thing and to pursue this and to be this. She wants to live a life for herself. And she decides that, no, I'm going to go live my life for me. This story, this is the very same kind of narrative set up in Warrior Nun. And I just think it's interesting that we have two series, both with the protagonist being a female, and both of them faced with this kind of decision. In Warrior Nun, she can live for self, or she can basically serve God in fighting demons. So it's very much a more religious, because Warrior Nun is really, the titles of the episodes are biblical passages. You've got Roman Catholicism, you've got priests, you've got nuns, you've got the Vatican. It's very much that story is told in the context of religion. Here in Cursed, it's more about something mystical, kind of magical. There's some kind of mystical, magical world that is, in a sense, she can choose to serve its purpose, its destiny, or live for herself. Same basic concept though. The central character, the protagonist, has to make this decision, and Warrior Nun and in Cursed, the protagonist at the beginning makes the decision, I'm going to live for me. I'm going to live for me. I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to go pursue what I want. And in Cursed, it doesn't take long. In one episode, well, she finds herself pulled right back into the thing that she was trying to run from. So that's a central major part of the story. Now, there is another element here. In Cursed, the bad guys, I guess you could say, the antagonist, really is a group, kind of an army of, well, clearly they're religious. Clearly they believe in God. Clearly there's associating it with Christianity to some level, because on the back of their heads, they have kind of like this brand of the cross on the top of their heads. So you have the cross, they talk about God, and they're kind of the antagonist. Now, to me, that's just too on the nose. That's so common. Let's take the religious, anything that's kind of religious or kind of associated with Christianity, let's kind of make them the antagonists. Let's make them the bad guys. Let's make them, the ones that we can't trust. And I just think that's I just think that's too can we be a little bit more creative? The protagonists are not going to be, quote unquote, the religious person, and the antagonist or somehow the religious people are going to be the antagonist and the bad people. I know that fits with obviously we're living in a time where people have kind of moved away from religion, and they've moved away from that, and they don't have a religious worldview. But it's like, do you have to kind of constantly take the thing that seems closely associated with Christianity and make them the antagonist? I just think that becomes lazy in storytelling, but that's kind of what we have here. The protagonist, she's definitely not in the Christian world. The antagonist, they have a cross, they talk about God, and they're the ones doing all the bad. So you have clearly this setup, and you obviously have this setup that the protagonist is basically seen as being a witch. All right, so you have that. Now, obviously, there is a little historical connection of witches and women being accused of being witches and being put to death and being killed in Europe. We could talk at different times, the witch trials in history, how widespread there were. Obviously, we saw a little bit of it here in the United States of America, Boston, Salem. Boston, I think, is where the first person accused of a witch, and then went to trial, and I think they were put to death. And then it moved to Salem, and I've visited Salem. I've gone to the Witch Museum in Salem, and I've studied the history of that. So so obviously there is a connection there, but I think sometimes it almost becomes just the stereotype. But okay, whether like it or not, I just want you to see that. So we have two really major ideas in the first episode that's setting up the series. The female, all right, this younger female trying to make this decision. Does she live for herself, or does she live for this grander, greater purpose? All right. And clearly, I think people can kind of relate to struggling about, what am I going to do in my life? Am I going to live for this, or am I going to pursue this? I think everyone trying to find their purpose in life, trying to find the thing they're going to live for. I think we can all relate to that part of the story. And of course, remember, this is very important in Cursed, and the same thing in Warrior Nun. In Cursed, the central character is young, so you kind of have a young adult drama. And a young adult drama is this kind of coming of age, going through that struggle of trying to figure out who they are and what they want to do in their life and what they want to live for, and everyone around them, the adults, trying to force them to do this and telling them to do that. So in one sense, you've got this kind of connection to King Arthur and that kind of storytelling, that kind of fantasy storytelling. But it's hard to get away that there's a central element of this that's kind of a young adult drama. So is it fantasy? Is it young adult drama? Is it a mixture of both? Yeah, maybe. So those are some elements to look out for. It is rated TV mature. Now, in the first episode, there's no major sexual content. There is a brief scene of non-sexual nudity where an individual, I won't tell you the name of the character or what's going on, but basically something happening with kind of magic and this crazy thing happening, and he's laying on the floor, and there's kind of, well, I won't really explain what's going on, but he kind of rolls to his side and you can see his backside. There's nothing sexual going on, but so just so that you know that, really the language, I don't even really remember really being any language of any significance. There is violence. I will say I will just say this: episode 1 ends in a very bloody way. I will just say that it ends with a lot of blood splatter at the end of episode 1. So it definitely has some violence. It is TV mature, so I'm assuming somewhere in the series we'll probably get to something more sexual and maybe more language. So just be aware of that. Now, there are a lot of articles being written about the show that are posted all over the place. So let me just give you a quote from one. And I think it's kind of interesting. Let's see here. What do I want to read? The show. I'm going to just read some different quotes from this. The show ultimately fails its young female protagonist, who has all the cool promise of a sword-wielding female destined to lead her people to freedom. Instead, they don't pull that off. I'm not going to tell you everything else they say because I think they give a little bit away. I will agree with this. There's something kind of broken in the storytelling in episode 1. Early on, the protagonist, the key protagonist, the female, They clearly demonstrate that she has some kind of magic wielding power. And then when everything's going completely batcrap crazy, okay, everything's going wrong, well, guess what? They don't allow her really to use that power. It's like, where is the power? The power seems to be missing when everything's going completely crazy. Like, so she uses the power early on, but then she doesn't use the power there. So it's almost like they don't really let the protagonist shine, at least not in episode 1. Now, you could argue by the time episode 1 ends, she is shining and they're really trying to make her look powerful and really cool. It seems to me the mistake is early on, they should not have shown her having any power at all. They should have not shown that power and then let the power be revealed somewhere closer to the end in a dramatic way. But they showed her having power. Then they almost demonstrated her being helpless. Then they show her having power. And it was this weird, like, so does the protagonist, is she powerful? Do I look at her like, whoa, look at her? Or do I look at her going, man, she's kind of weak. She's kind of pathetic. So it just seems kind of odd in what they try to do there. So you can draw that. Again, I'm not going to try to give too much away. To me, the major focus of the story is just her trying to figure out, is she going to live for herself? Is she going to live for this greater, grander purpose? And they don't even really spend a lot of time exploring that, because they really, I mean, that whole little kind of conflict about what is she going to live for is that conflict is revealed, and that conflict seems to be resolved all within the first episode. So you're kind of like, okay, so where does the story go from there? Now, it sounds like, and from that other reviews who've looked at the whole series, which I've yet to do, that they feel like that at times the show doesn't really know what it wants to be. Does it want to be fantasy? Does it want to be a young adult drama? Does it want to be romance? What does it want to be? That could be dangerous. I think the biggest problem I had with episode 1 is I can't say that the main character, the female protagonist, I can't say that I was really drawn into liking her character. I can't say there was anything that drew me in. The way she plays the part just kind of, it's almost like you're just kind of watching her, but you don't really feel anything for her. You're not really drawn into her emotions or her thinking. And that can be obviously detrimental to the story. Another article about the show says this: Netflix Cursed tries to imitate Game of Thrones, but fails. Now, I will argue, and I think it's not fair. Any show that's a fantasy, any show that's set at, kind of the time of, that this series is set in, I think in our current situation, people just immediately kind of reach back and say Game of Thrones, Game of Thrones. I don't think, unless the show is trying to indicate it's trying to be Game of Thrones, don't try to compare it to Game of Thrones. Let Cursed be what it is. Just let it be its own show. Don't compare it to anything else. I'm not a big fan of comparing one show to another show. I'm not a big fan of comparing one movie to another movie. I just let the show stand on its own. It's a Netflix series. 10 seasons, or 10 episodes, not 10 seasons, 10 episodes in the first season. Just judge it on itself. If you compare it to Game of Thrones, well, then it's not going to be the Game of Thrones, and then you're going to feel disappointed. Don't do that. The title is not Game of Thrones. The title is Cursed. Now, if you see blatant copying and ripping off Game of Thrones, then you can make a criticism. But if it's not trying to be Game of Thrones, then why should you judge it for not being Game of Thrones? Do you really want it to be Game of Thrones? I don't. Game of Thrones was Game of Thrones. This isn't Game of Thrones, so don't be Game of Thrones. Be Cursed. That's the show, and that's what it should be. So I'm not a big fan of that criticism. Let's see here. Now, and this is what some people are saying. After a promising start, it becomes clear that Cursed doesn't have a firm grasp on what kind of show it wants to be. Failing to tie all those elements, all the different elements that you see in it, into one connected entity. Torn between a young adult drama and R-rated violence, Cursed seems to decide it's best to wander into Game of Thrones territory with political intrigue and one impressive battle sequence, one-shot battle sequence. Now, maybe that's why some people are criticizing it for not being, or trying to beat Game of the Thrones or comparing it to it because it may wander in that territory. I will agree that it seems like right now, like I can't say after episode 1, okay, is this all fantasy kind of, epic fantasy kind of story? But that the central characters are young adults. So it's going to have the young adult drama idea there. And you're going to have the young adult romance and the young adult coming of age. So, but can it be both? Can't you have a young adult drama coming of age story told within the context of fantasy, swords, magical forces, and that kind? I think you can pull that off. I just don't know if the show clearly gives you an identity. I'm more convinced that the series will stand or fall really in how they handle the protagonist. She's the central character, and the thing that they failed to do in my power is, one, they didn't really let her shine because they kind of made her look strong, then kind of made her look weak, and then made her look really, really cool at the end. Now, do they kind of go back and forth with this? And are they going to make her look just dumb and foolish? In other words, by episode 3, am I done with her? By episode 3, I'm just irritated with her and I don't care what happens. Well, if that happens, the show fails because you've got to keep me invested in the story of the protagonist, right? I mean, you have to. So that's going to be interesting to watch how that develops. I've started it. I will finish it. That's what I always do. Outside of that, I don't want to give anything else away. I will say this. I can't say that I was like overwhelmed. I definitely was not overwhelmed with the I'm more impressed with the acting of the female protagonist and Warrior Nun. I am not nearly as impressed with the female protagonist in Cursed. I'll leave it right there. And that may be the biggest problem. Now, not blaming the acting. Maybe it's just the way the director wanted her character to come across, but there's just nothing there. Warrior Nun, I'm really drawn into the protagonist. Now, she may get on my nerves before it's over, but they at least made me feel something for her and drew me in, and I'm like, okay, I'm here to go. So I am a big fan of the King Arthur myth, the King Arthur legend. I've read plenty of the King Arthur story plenty of times when I was young. So the fact that it's kind of connected to that legend, that myth, that world is interesting. But if it's just kind of connected and they don't really do anything with it, then who knows? I don't know. Again, it's currently on. It's called Cursed, currently streaming on Netflix. I'll just leave it there. I'll leave it there. Since it's almost 1:30 in the morning, I'll stop right there. So there you have it. Just some initial thoughts. Just trying to think it through. Just know that the first episode does end in a very bloody way. So just be prepared. Be prepared for that. You may say that it's over the top. You may even argue that last scene. I don't know. I think there'll be different reactions. I think they kind of make her look cool, but some of the special effects there kind of, as far as kind of like this action kind of fight battle thing that happens there, I don't know if it really comes across in a believable way. The last episode I watched of Warrior Nun, that fight scene, that battle scene that happened was super cool. Here, it started off like, oh, it looks cool, and then it kind of like, yeah, don't know. You can draw your own conclusions. All right, currently streaming on Netflix, Cursed. It debuted yesterday. I've watched episode 1. Those are my thoughts. Thanks for tuning in to this early morning episode of the Currently On podcast. Please subscribe. Please share it. And hey, I'll keep bringing you information about what's on. And I watched another movie on The Curse of the Werewolf on Peacock TV from 1961. That was a bizarre movie. I want to talk about that. I'll probably talk about that in a different episode. But Curse of the Werewolf, currently streaming on Peacock TV, the Peacock television streaming service. You may want to watch it. It's not your typical werewolf story, so and it's missing some action. And well, I don't want to get into that, but yeah, I watched that one as well this evening, and we could talk about that, and we could talk about everything else going on this weekend, but I'll just stop right there. All right, everyone, thanks for listening. Hey, if you're listening to me now, I don't know why you're awake. You really need to go to sleep because this is kind of ridiculous. You're up at 1:22 in the morning listening to me talk about a show on Netflix. All right, go to sleep. All right, everyone, thanks for listening. Everyone have a good one.